It's been a busy few weeks, to say the least, in our nation's capital. Congress was able to avoid a partial government shutdown, at least temporarily. The House impeached Secretary Mayorkas, and Joe Biden took another vacation. Joining us now to bring us an update from Washington, D.C. is 4th District Congressman Ron Estes. Congressman, thanks for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's good to be on.
We could spend hours and hours just in our last couple of minutes. A lot of interesting issues popped up. So, as you know, because I know you know everything about the Census Bureau and the data in Wichita, we have about almost 400,000 people that call the city of Wichita home, and that doesn't count Sedgwick County. In December of 2023, nearly that many folks attempted to cross the border, but were stopped and processed by the Border Patrol. At least they stopped them. That's a lot. Is the administration incapable of securing the border, or do they just not want to?
It's absurd what they're doing. And using the word stop's kind of a misnomer, because in more cases than not, individuals cross the border and then they go seek the Customs and Border Patrol in order to be processed, i.e., which means they get food and shelter and clothing and all the things, and then shuffled around throughout the country. So it's appalling now that during the month of December, almost as many people as the population of Wichita came in. Since President Biden came into office, there have been 9 million people that have crossed the border illegally that we know of. And that consists of including some gotaways, people that they've seen on a camera, or they saw sensors, or they saw footprints in the desert, but they never did have a chance to capture them at all.
Well, we'll get into some of the nomenclature that some of the folks in the media are talking about the illegal migrants. I just want to be clear, when it say processed, I'm thinking about it too quickly. Process means, well, we got who you are and go do what you want.
That's right.
Is it that easy?
Basically, they turn them loose throughout the country. I mean, and we know the current laws work because we saw it during the Trump administration. The policies that President Trump put in place work. I mean, the Remain in Mexico policy. I mean, if President Biden would just re-implement that Trump policy, that would stop 60 to 70% of the people that cross the border illegally every year.
Well, let's jump to that with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, who I think he does a good job on the Talking Head shows. I don't know, but my bar is low for folks on that. I saw a video, I think it was this morning, where he was talking about their priority was to overturn all the Trump border policies, which I'm surprised even conservative media hasn't necessarily discussed. Well, there it is. And if they just weren't able to do it because they were overwhelmed, that's one thing, but it seems to be intentional. What happens next? It seems like it's difficult, not likely for the Senate to take the next step, or are they going to?
Well, like I said, there doesn't need to be any additional laws. I mean, President Trump proved that under the current laws, that if you put good policies in place, and here's where I maybe contrast what's out there is, under current law, the president has the option to do some of these policies. President Trump chose to do them and restrict the flow of illegal immigrants. President Biden has chosen not to put good policies in place, and that's why we're overwhelmed with the number of people that have invaded the border. The Senate bill was to put part of those policies in law where the president had to implement them, but there were all sorts of loopholes and gaps big enough that people could still run through in that process. I mean,
well, it does seem hard. It seemed like many elements of the bill were good, but they're not doing what law allows them now. Let's fix that. What do you think the Senate's going to do with the impeachment of Mayorkas?
I don't know. Senator Schumer has said that he's not interested in bringing it up anytime soon. He hadn't really talked about it, which is, as Senator McConnell said, that's a very poor standard for the Senate leadership to take in terms of, bring it up, vote for it. I mean, that's one of the roles of the legislative branch is to provide that checks and balances on the executive branch. And when the impeachment articles came through the House, I mean, the whole purpose and looking at it from my standpoint, what I saw when I voted yes on the impeachment proceedings was primarily because Mayorkas was telling lies when he was come before Homeland Security and come through oversight. I mean, basically, he was saying the border's under control. There's no reason to worry about all of these illegal immigrants coming across because it's under control. And anybody that looks at the news knows that's not true.
There's so many negative things about the overwhelming of the border. I guess I think at least I view, and I think a lot of Americans, hey, we're great with legal immigration. And this makes it more difficult for legal immigration reform, in my view. I love a comment Trump made in 2015, 2016, a couple things. One is, yeah, we're going to build a wall with a great big door. Love that. And then he also said, let's make legal immigration easier and illegal immigration harder. And I think the fact that we're not making illegal immigration harder makes it harder. I think the public is rightly suspect of when you talk about reforming visas and work permits and all that. I think if they knew the substance, yes, let's get more folks to work here and that want to come here for the right reasons. And it's many reasons it's disappointing. So when I get to the nomenclature, it's frustrating to just kind of roll your eyes about some of the things that folks will want to say about lots of things that you and I care about. Apparently, the Department of Homeland Security released a new memo indicating that the U.S. welcomes newcomers, which means illegal migrants and they're illegal because they're breaking our laws no matter what their intent is. And now the president and others are saying, and members of Congress that are on the other aisle than you in the media are saying it's your fault. Congressional Republicans are to blame for not passing the Senate's border bill. I guess you already answered that it probably wouldn't have hurt, but was it worth that? And it makes everybody think then the problem's solved.
Well, actually, the issue was the Senate never passed a border bill.
Oh, that's right. It was just proposed.
They talked about it, and then they said, well, this isn't good. This doesn't solidify enough things in law, or the things that it does solidify is only half the problem. It's amazing when we see in political speak, and you see it particularly with the Democrats, is that when people realize how bad their policies are, they change the terminology that they use. So when people understand what they mean by illegal immigrants, then they change it to newcomers. As if that sounds
true.
Good.
And I guess very sense I'm not Hispanic here, but I think those on the left came up with this term Latinx for both genders, because that's not how the Spanish language, and most of the Latinas and Hispanics I know are wondering we don't want to use that term. I think there's public polling about it too. So everybody listen on the show, his voice is very familiar, so I probably don't need to reintroduce him, but Congressman Ron Estes is with us from here in Wichita, the 4th District. So let's talk a little bit of economics. The president is continuing to claim that inflation is down. I guess it's down from 9 to 6, but it's still a lot higher than it was. And one of the most recent consumer price index show that the costs for Americans continue to increase and even accelerate in certain areas. I know it certainly is for food. Gas goes up and way down. Why aren't folks pardon the pun, buying Bidenomics?
Yeah. Well, and probably, and what President Biden points to, and his staff, Secretary Yellen and others, point to, that the rate of inflation, i.e. the rate that prices are going up, has slowed. And they try to tout that as that's a positive thing. But the prices are still going up. And we saw over the fall and early winter, because of the decline in gas prices, we saw that filter through the economy. So it looked like prices were going down. Now that that's all been filtered in, we're starting to see the monthly price increases ratchet back up. And the best metric that I use is going back to when President Biden came into office. The prices have gone up almost 18% since he came into office, and wages have gone up some, but not nearly enough to cover that. And so people are feeling that pinch. They're seeing eggs cost more than they did. The gas costs more.
Just
than they did.
Very, very quick antidote. I do the grocery shopping in our house because I like doing it. Most of the time it's online, but recently I was at a local grocery store in Topeka, and it was in the ketchup, mustard, ranch dressing aisle, and a lady looks over and says, "Miracle Whip, $9?" She just decided to tell me this. $9? I can't do it. And she just goes on, and I grew up with Miracle Whip, so I appreciated that. We're on a break, or headed to a break. Do you mind sticking around for another 15 minutes or so?
That'll be great.
Thank you. With us still is 4th District Congressman Ron Estes. You penned an op-ed recently in the High Plains Journal, which is a wonderful publication and highly respected throughout the High Plains, which is the Dakotas to Texas. I read about there's so many issues and there's so much info. It's hard to track, but it is a great publication. You highlighted a new EPA rule that targets local meat processors. Can you tell us a little bit more and why you're concerned?
Yeah, really. I mean, what they're trying to do in the EPA rules is that to force local meat processors to follow this exact same standards that large meat packing plants have. And obviously there's a distinction and a difference in terms of the volume of production and the volume of tracking and reporting and equipment you have to have and a monitoring. And it's really one of those things that it seems like so many of the rules and regulations come out attacking small businesses, trying to create barriers to them to succeed and or forcing them to be bought off by the large, or to close, or to be bought off by the larger companies.
Do you know, this has always been a problem with a lot of agencies, particularly EPA, if they even have the authority to do it, or is it going to be litigated?
One of the things that I've seen since I've been in Congress is that we do a poor job writing legislation. The legislation that's written is very loosely written, and it rolls into, okay, we want to address this certain issue, and then we say the secretary of such and such agency will write rules and regulations. Well, then basically we've given up control of making that decision. And then the secretaries and their staff go off and write all these crazy rules and regulations that weren't at all with the intentions when the law was passed.
That happens in Kansas too, not near to the extent, and it's easier to address here in Kansas with the agencies. I thought this issue was over. I'll just say I'm a former student loan holder, and I paid all of mine off. It certainly pinched me quite a bit. So recently the Biden administration sent an email to, over 150,000 people that says they're going to forgive their student loans. I thought this had already been decided, and so why are they taking another run at it? Because they know that they're unlikely to have the authority. And I think even Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi already said they don't have the authority when they were in power.
Yeah.
Why are they doing this?
What we've seen, because it's an election year, is why they're doing it. I mean, it's pandering to a bunch of young workers that basically, and it's less than 13% of the country's population that have student loans. And basically what they're trying to do an end run around the Supreme Court that ruled that they could not do this mass blanket forgiveness. And forgiveness is a wrong word. It's a transfer. The debt is being transferred from this 13% of the population to the other 87% of the population to pay off people that never did go to college, or people that paid off their student loan debt. It is a problem. So now they've gone in and they've tweaked what they said the approach was, so they can try to work around and do an end run around the Supreme Court.
So they think they've solved the legal issue?
I don't know that they've solved it or not, or whether they think they can make another swing at it and accomplish and create this angst that, I need to get my student loan processed, and President Biden promised to do that. And therefore, if it goes before the Supreme Court again and say he's wrong again, then it will sound bad.
I think that's also an issue that does not have a lot of support across the broad spectrum, because there's not, some people do take loans to go to technical college, et cetera, but a lot of folks, whether they went to college or not, don't like it in both parties. I think that's the public polling I've seen.
Yeah, and it's just not fair. It's not fair to the folks that paid theirs off. It's not fair to the folks that worked through school and didn't take as many loans. And because student loans are fungible. When you take them out of college, you can use them for your tuition. You can also use them for beer and pizza in terms of what you eat while you're there.
Oh, yeah, I know. And dry cleaners and green fees and a lot of other things. Back to the issue of, make sure everybody knows this is Alan Cobb. I'm talking with 4th District Congressman Ron Estes. Again, very distinct voice. So I'm sure you all know it. And he's on the radio and TV all the time and does a great job with his constituents here all the time in Wichita and in the 4th District. So we talked earlier about terminology, where sometimes those on the left try to soften things. Well, sometimes they just can't help themselves. So recently there were a couple of MSNBC panelists, take that for what it's worth, so you probably know where I'm headed. They described white rural voters, which, by the way, there's plenty of people of color in rural areas, and they tend to share the same politics. But they described them as ignorant, conspiracy-driven, and they're a threat to democracy. I can't even believe a lot of folks left of center, they had to have cringed at that, but surely your Democratic colleagues don't describe you that way, do they?
I think quite a few do.
Okay.
And in fact, the matter is, Hillary Clinton made a lot of heyday talking about deplorables through that process, and nobody on the left criticized her for that. President Obama talked about grabbing their guns and butter, and Bibles and went through that. In fact, one of my colleagues from Florida is talking about, deplorables in states like Florida and Texas. She's from Florida and represents a district in Florida and is willing to insult other Floridians.
Well, it's so politics is tough enough, and there's division and tension just by being political or being part of politics. You don't need to throw gasoline on the fire and make it worse. It's unfortunate. A lot of news. Actually, I'm surprised it didn't get more news, more coverage, but about the continuing resolution and where the government's going to shut down, furlough government workers, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a temporary solution that I apologize. It has been voted on or will be.
So last week we voted to extend the deadline, doing a continuing resolution, which basically means that we'll fund the government at the same rate as last year.
That's better than an increase.
We're halfway through the year. Our fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So we're nearly halfway through the year. We don't have appropriations for the entire year. So there's 12 discretionary bills that fund, EPA and the Department of Defense and veterans and all the different agencies. 6 of them were extended till March 8th, which is this coming Friday, and 6 of them were extended till March 22nd. Sounds like they're going to release text for the 6 for this Friday late tonight, and so we should be able. Text may already be out, so I'll be able to look through that. So we prepare to vote for that appropriations for those 6.
What do you think would be the best case scenario to get well beyond March? What's possible?
So once this gets done, then we'll end up having to start up for the 2025 year because that starts October 1st. So we're already behind on working through that.
This has been discussed by a lot of policy wonks, both right and left, where it's been a long time since Congress had a real budget. And Republicans, when they are in control, it seems like an institutional problem. So why is it so difficult to do the budget?
It's been roughly 30 years.
30 years, my goodness.
Since all 12 appropriations bills were done on time, passed by the House and the Senate, and signed by the President in order to meet the October 1st deadline. We've got to do things differently, and that was part of the reason that was folks were driving. We can't continue down this route that we're doing of putting in a continuing resolution, and then usually it's set to expire right before Christmas. So we get this angst of you can't shut the country down at Christmas time. Members want to go home to spend time with their family. So you pass a bad omnibus bill that has bloated spending in it, and that's led us to the debt in terms of where we're at right now. And it's continuing to grow. We've got to do things differently. We've got to focus on how do we bend the spending curve on both these 12 discretionary bills, but also on what I call the automatic spending bills. Sometimes they're called the entitlements or the mandatory bills, but those actually are growing as well, and we need to sit down and focus on those too.
There was a really good op-ed in the Wall Street Journal sent on this week about what Canada has done with their version of Social Security that doesn't cause cuts, but you can't ignore Social Security when it comes to the deficit. Medicare, I think, is a little different because you're paying for a service, so you look at the cost of medical care. But they proposed a few things that I had never thought about, and you're not increasing the tax, the Social Security tax out of your paycheck, et cetera. So I'm sure you've probably heard of some of those things. It's not private accounts, but instead of investing in treasury bonds, put some of that money in the market that has consistent 7-8% over time. If people want to connect with you, they can find you on Twitter. Correct me if I'm wrong. At Rep R-E-P-R-O-N Estes, and online at estes.house.gov. That's
right.
Correct, right? And since I have Ron's personal cell phone, let me give that out. No, just kidding. I appreciate you joining. Any last words of encouragement?
Yeah, I know. This is. I mean, we go back. I go back tomorrow. Back to D.C. Our budget committee, which I'm a member of, as well as Ways and Means, we're focusing on how to implement a 10-year budget that actually balances the budget in that 10th year, so that we can stop this growth of debt.
How are you enjoying the direct flight?
I don't get to use it as much because it leaves a little too early when I'm coming back, and it gets me in a little late for the first vote. So I'm using it tomorrow. I'm flying in a day early, and we're going to be able to get there. So I've tried to use it as much as I can. And
yeah,
it is nice.
Big deal. Well, Ron, thanks for joining, my friend, and it's good to see you, and appreciate all your time.
Great. Thank you.